This video is sponsored by Gamos Metal Cruise 2023.
Amassing the bodies and pits as they die, sentient and filthy they rot. Flammable and sitting discarded like waste. For the fire of the handgun, you played it all wrong. And soul and valor.
Hails and welcome to a zine review. It's been a while really since the last time I reviewed something readable for you, but as you might have already noticed, especially if you're a long-time viewer, follower, whatever on the channel, you might notice that I've gone through each and every issue of Bardo Methodology zine, and here is the latest one I got to review. Now, there was a bit of a gap between the issues before this one, and I was already wondering what the hell has happened. Sometimes just life happens. Much like with bands, sometimes you feel notice there is a 1 or 2 year gap and suddenly there is 5 years. Now this is the latest issue, which you can see here, number 8, and features quite a list of bands. I will show them to you here so it's easier to keep track what I'm talking about. This one starts with Destroyer 666, which is not first timer. Then there is Australian black trash, whatever you want to call it. Atlas from United States, one that I recently interviewed myself, and these are very interesting to mention because for example, Atlas interview here is very different than mine, so these are actually kind of completing one another. Then there is a Leviathan from United States as well as Black Witchery. We have Cultas de Ghouls. Now, if I recall correctly, this is from Poland. And then there is Thunderbolt from Poland, and this is also something like a completing my interview with Terrestrial Hospice, because the guy is exactly the same, just different band, different era and all that stuff. Black Death from Russia, which is definitely something different than lots of European or Western world bands. Miss Thurming from Iceland. Nordvis Label, not the band, from Sweden, which is kind of a continuation or successor to the Armageddon interview earlier. And then Mortus and Reveravum ib Malacht and Offermod from Sweden as well. Now, the editor Niklas Göransson of Bardo Methodology lives in Sweden, so that kind of comes with the territory. Much like I'm more inclined to interview Finnish bands for the very same reason. Geographical reasons sometimes make a big difference. But now that I have introduced you the list of bands here, let's just try to go through this. Because it's kind of a thick zine, more than 70 pages overall, and in A4 size, and as you can see, the font is not exactly big. This is not a criticism, this is just more like a factual thing to say. There's a lot of stuff to read. I've mentioned this a few times before, but this much of reading, I mean, just take an example of this particular page here with very little photos or images. This amount of text could easily fill, say, at least 4 pages of a typical softcover book. And as such, if you just kind of like do a basic math, 4 times of 70 pages equals roughly more than 200 pages of stuff, meaning this might look like a zine, and technically speaking it's a zine, but how much there is to read really is worth a book, really. And that's one of the beauty of Bardo Methodology zine. When you compare it to, say, regular black metal or whatever metal zines, the interviews are more often more like, hey, what's up, tell me the latest news of your camp. So suddenly 1/3 of the interview is just filled with very basic questions like, okay, we are black metal band from Brazil and we don't like Jesus Christ. You kind of got the kind of idea. Then you get a little bit of latest rumors, what there is to really tell about bands, and they are often very, very outdated by the very time the zine or whatever publication comes out of the printing house and all that stuff. So a lot of stuff with the basic zines just pale in comparison for these reasons, because Bardo, this is kind of a shameless promotion to say about itself, but our work ethics seem to be very much the same. We don't really talk about daily mundane events, but we drill a little bit deeper. However, where we differ, and this I think is a beautiful thing, is that Bardo talks very, very different things than I do with my interviews. And as such, the result is kind of a completing rather than competing, if that makes any sense. And all these interviews here, for example, within this particular issue, number 8, they are very different from one another because the angles of these different stories, they can be very much of today and they can be very much detailed, filled with anecdotes from the past and all that stuff. As always, the first few issues, I don't know how limited they are, come with nice looking posters. Might not be the biggest in the house, but posters nonetheless. Now let's take a little bit of look here inside how it actually looks like, because I've been just babbling the general stuff. As all the issues, there will be first the editorial. Maybe I should do it this way with the microphone and all. Editorial part is here. Then you will have the first interviews with photos. Sometimes they really take you back in the very same way you would be reading a biography of a certain band. So there are nice photos of various artists, photographers, and pictures, which then again complement the whole look. So it's not just boring thing visually either. You will have all these different eras described, phases of the band. Sometimes it's live, sometimes it's more like logos and what have you. I'm not gonna of course go through all the pages because you pretty much now know the drill, what to expect. You will have bands according to your own photos. Okay, this is a good example of how things can be different. Here is a blood-drawn pentagram, and a couple of pages later you might find Jesus Christ kind of an imagery here. And this is actually described here because, for example, this band from Sweden is a band that turned later on to Christianity, which makes this rather either interesting read or kind of annoying or just like weird. But for example, Destroyer 666 here is touching the history of the band and very much describing what was going on back in the days. And I think it's a good hindsight. It's more about like a growing experience rather than just, describing what really happened. It's kind of a retrospective reflections of the past and all that stuff. That pretty much the same thing goes with Atlas. They're really touching the past and explaining, tragic events such as deaths, but also growing experience and all that stuff. Leviathan then again goes really more into drug abuse and suicide things and all that stuff. So lots of tragic stories from different angles. I think all in all these interviews here kind of explain a lot of different kind of stories. So no way one band is very much similar like the next band, and all these kind of describe not only the bands, what they have. For example, I think it was really cool to read about Black Witcher, how he is a dog person, if that makes any sense to you. Shouldn't come to you as a big news that a lot of us people in black metal scene, we really like our animals. I actually hanging out with our dog here. So these kind of stuff, I mean, they either give you a more humane image of what's going on and yet still very much touch the topics such as death, blasphemy, various other topics, criminal intentions, violence sometimes, tragic events in life, what have you. And of course, these kind of imagery tell their own story when you combine them with words. And Thunderbolt, for example, is really touching the history in different ways than, say, those Destroyer 666 or Atlas ones. What else I should mention? I think one of the most interesting stories in this particular issue is the Black Death story from Russia, because obviously Russian scene was quite different than, Swedish, Finnish, Norwegian black metal scenes. So the stories and the style can be something different. I mean, you probably wouldn't expect a picture like that to surface from some of the more corpse-painted black metal scene and all that stuff. And of course there are newer bands as well, which is, I think, important counterbalance, like Misthruming. It's very different era than, say, Destroyer 666, for that matter. or even Black Death. And then you have, for example, this label story, Nordris, which is also touching a lot of bands. This is actually related to the previous story on this story related to Armageddon, whatever Swedish bands there were previously. So these are all very different stories. Then you are having this kind of a two band feature, Mortus and that Reverorum im Malach, which are Orthodox Christian black metal. These are very curious because they necessarily might not resonate with you at all. If you're much like this kind of aggressive, how should I describe myself? Aggressive, how to say, anti-theistic person or atheistic people, these bands just might give you an even wider gap between you and the bands because they might not resonate you at all. But it's interesting to learn about that nonetheless. And then, last but not least, is Offermord, a very curious band tied with drugs, criminal intentions, Satanism, and all those topics, which then again tell a very, very fascinating story of overall about Swedish scene in the past. Overall, I would say once again a great issue. Call me a fanboy if you will. I don't really care because that's quite true. But this issue is now out, been for a while, and if you're looking for some high quality reading about black metal bands and beyond, maybe Bardo Methodology is something that you should have been subscribed to long time ago, be it on the website, their Facebook website, or like what I have here, the actual website of the publication here, describing whatever is going on in this particular issue, as well as these newer releases, newer interviews, whatever. And of course, you will find more stuff here on the archive site, going very much back into the stuff. Not everything here on the site is full, as much as I can tell, and not every story made by Bardo is on the pages of the magazine. If I have understood it correctly, I don't remember seeing everything that has been reviewed by Niklas published on the magazine. So these are more or less completing one another. And I think that's a beautiful thing, all in all, especially if you're interested in learning the past, learning the history, learning lots of anecdotes and all that stuff. So I think this is my sales pitch, even though this is by no means any kind of a paid video or anything like that. I'm just merely reviewing this issue, talking about it, and I hope you will have the interest to dive deep into the culture of underground metal. And if not, maybe that's not your cup of tea, that's fine also. But those who really want to know more should be getting this particular issue, as well as the previous issue, in their hands, and just go for it. You will find more info about the publication and the interview style, of course, on the website. And if you are using Facebook, I strongly recommend you to follow the updates by Bardo Methodology there as well. This is my review. I hope you have a good time with it, and should you have questions or whatnot, let me know in the comments box below, and I'll get back to you. Now off you go, read some good stuff, listen to some good music, and enjoy your weekend. Rauta out.